Hi, welcome to my presentation on capital budgeting for my MBA840 managerial accounting class. My name is Han Wen. While there are many other essential decisions, no other decision places a company in more jeopardy other than the decision revolving around capital budgeting. That is the reason behind why I picked this topic for my final presentation. Before diving into the topic of capital budgeting, I just want to take a brief moment to discuss the definition of capital budgeting. It is the process that a business uses to determine which proposed fixed assets purchases it should accept and which should be declined. It is a method of analyzing and comparing substantial future investment and expenditures to determine which ones are most worthwhile. In other words, it is the process a company management uses to identify what capital projects will create the biggest return compared to the amount it was invested. Each project is ranked by its potential future return, so the company management know which project to invest it in first. It is the main tool of financial management. Capital budgeting is one of the fundamental activities of a company. Company uses various tools to analyze their capital expenditures to determine the economic worthiness of the proposed project. The capital investment decision, usually long-term, involves a substantial, potentially irreversible commitment of resources, determine the future growth of the company, and also subject to a significant degree of risk. As I already mentioned, the nature of capital budgeting is the heavy investment that has a long-term implication. The irreversibility can also complicate the decision-making process. Therefore, special care should always be taken when making an investment decision. This process is used to create a quantitative view of each investment, thereby giving a rational basis of making the decision. There are an overall 4 discernible stages of capital budgeting. First, we will perform the preliminary screening of the project. Then follow to assess the feasibility of the proposal, followed by capital project evaluation, which arguably the most important step of all. Once we have all the options gathered, the management team will have to decide to proceed with the project or to reject it. Once the proposed project is determined to be a viable option, it will receive an authorization at this stage. Once everything is done, the final yet critical step in capital budgeting would be to follow up and compare the estimated to the actual results. Due to a volatile, uncertain nature of the market, the company needs to accurately identify each project and all of its variables while keeping these problems in mind. First, the ranking of the project, the choice of one project over the other ones. Second, the capital rationing, the limited budget of resources, which we'll dive a little deeper in the next few slides here. Third, the limitation imposed by top management on the total volume of investments. There are many factors that influences the decision-making process, and here I have listed a few factors that can commonly change the project's viability. Availability of resources, capital returns, trend of earnings, structure of capital, and the economical value of the projects. There are a number of methods that companies commonly use to analyze the capital expenditures to evaluate a project. The most commonly used methods are listed here on the slides. The methods are divided into 2 categories: non-discounted cash flow and discounted cash flow. Under non-discounted cash flow, we have payback period, accounting rate of return. Under discounted cash flow, we have discounted payback period, net present value, internal rate of return, modified internal rate of return, and profitability index. Before diving into the concept of each individual capital budgeting techniques and the investment decision-making process, we need to have a basic understanding of time value of money. It is the concept that refers to money at the present time is worth more than the identical sum in the future due to its potential earning capacity. The foremost constraint in the capital is the limitation of resources, whether it is raised through debt or equity. Since the capital expenditure provide the benefits into the future, determining the present value of the project will provide the measurement when the decision of how much capital should be invested or restricted on the proposed project. There are two methods accounting for time value of money. Those are compounding and discounting. Compounding refers to the future value of present sum of money, and discounting indicates the present value of future sum of money. The money has a time preference that accounts for the risk, uncertainty, and preference for. There are two methods of payback period. Under regular payback period, it is the shortest amount of time it takes to recover the initial investment. There is some cons to it. It does not account for the cash flow after the payback period, and it does not account for the time value of money. On the other hand, discounted payback period accounts for the time value of money, and it is defined as the time required by the cumulative discounted cash flow to recover the initial investment. In other words, NPV equals 0. The advantage of using payback is it is a simple calculation. The project selection is based on the earning capacity of the project and can be easily measured and may be the best tool to evaluate the high-risk project. However, it has some disadvantages as well. It does not consider cash flow beyond the payback period. The cutoff period is very subjective, and it does not consider the probability of the economic life of the project. The next capital budgeting technique I would like to discuss would be the net present value. NPV is defined as the difference between all future value of cash inflows and the value of cash outflows over a period of time, discounted to the present. The cash flow of NPV is discounted to the present to adjust for the risk of investment opportunity and account for the time value of money. NPV recognizes the impact of time value of money and considered to be the best method of capital budgeting. If the net present value is positive, we should proceed and accept the investment. If the net present value is negative, then we would not make the investment. The NPV rules is a good investment rule of thumb because it measures the value of creation, reflects the timing of the project cash flows, reflects the risk. It has several strengths using this technique. It considers cash flow of the entire project and the time value of money. Cash flows assumed to be reinvested at the hurdle rate. It also considers all cash flows. However, it has some disadvantages as well. It assumes that cash received can be reinvested at the rate of return. It may not include managerial option embedded in the project. And it also may be more difficult to find and understand using this technique. Similar to the net present value, internal rate of return, IRR, is defined as the discount rate that equates the present value of cash inflows and outflows, making the net present value of the project 0. In other words, IRR is the expected rate of return that will be earned on an investment. The IRR is calculating by finding the discount rate, whereby the net investment amount equal to the total present value of all cash inflows. Using this technique has several advantages, including that it considers the cash flows and the time value of money. It also has the ability to compare the projects that are unequal size. However, disadvantages of this technique includes it requires a complex calculations. It also assumes that cash can be reinvested at the internal rate of return. I just want to take a brief moment to compare NPV and IRR. Both NPV and IRR will give the same result regarding a project in the two situations, when the project has conventional cash flow, and when the projects are independent. The acceptance of one does not affect the others. The NPV considers the reinvestment cash flow at the required rate of return, where IRR considers the reinvestment cash flow at the internal rate of return. NPV is better than IRR for a couple of the reasons. It's expressed in dollars rather than percentage, so we can add individual projects together. The NPV's assumption is more realistic and applicable in most situations because discounting rate is the financial cost, with the recovery is the main criterion, where IRR, the recovery is more of an interpolation. It is possible to have multiple IRRs for the same project. If the cash flows are not conventional, the IRR methods will have more than one solution, where NPV method will not have the same issues. In addition to the capital budgeting technique, I also want to touch on additional consideration in capital budgeting. First, adjusting for risk based on different risk level. Risk is where a company have a basis for a decision, but it still have the possibility of several outcomes. The wider the variation of the outcome, the higher the risk is. There are several techniques which company can use to evaluate the risk of the project that we'll further discuss in the next slide. Second, recognizing the unique risk factors specific for each project. There are several risks that company has to keep in mind. Capital investment in other countries can involve additional relevant risk of the project, including exchange rate risk, political risk, and hyperinflation. As discussed previously, post-analysis evaluation is not involved in the decision-making process, but it is equally as important. This post-analysis or review can help identify bias or errors within the overall process. Post-analysis audit aims to evaluate the efficiency and effectiveness of capital budgeting decision the management team has made. A formal tracking system of capital projects also tell the management team whether or not to continue this project. As I alluded on previous slide, there are several techniques a company can use to evaluate the risk of a project, including margin of safety, sensitivity analysis, scenario analysis, Monte Carlo simulation, decision tree analysis, but due to time constraint, I won't be going into details. Overall, a business is nothing more than a series of many capital budgeting decisions, whether it is minor or major. All business decisions involve accounting of cost versus benefit. That's the essence of capital budgeting. Understanding capital budgeting process is vital to understand how the business operates and creates future value. Since many capital investment require substantial amount of resources and a long-term commitment, it is vital that investment has a positive return of benefit. Management should be particularly interested in knowing the financial strength and weaknesses of each expenditure. Using capital budgeting techniques to measure the efficiency of the project is an essential tool at the hand of management. On that note, capital budgeting process is a crucial and necessary component of finance and business enterprise. With that said, this concludes my presentation on capital budgeting. Here are my preferences. Thank you for joining me. And also does not recognize the pattern of the cash flow, or consumption, and the investment opportunities.